Good morning. I have to admit, it's always a little daunting to get up here and deliver a lesson from God's Word. And really, this should be one of the more comfortable things for us because you're always so kind and so supportive after I've done so, and I appreciate that so much. And you're my family. And being around your family is supposed to be comfortable and supposed to be a happy thing. So I'm excited to get to do this, and I love the opportunity to do this. But it can be a little nerve-wracking at times. So bear with me as we go through this morning. And I'll have to be honest, I'm a little offended that Grant, Eric, and Lee felt the need to go to Africa to avoid hearing this. So I don't know how to take that, but I'm so glad that they were willing to leave the comforts of home and go do that and go see the works that we're supporting over there. And I'm so happy that we support the works over there, that we give help to those who are in need. I truly believe that's one of those missions of the church that we're to do, and I'm so glad that we help support those who need the gospel, which is everyone, and those who are in need in this life, and that we are so willing to provide that help and provide that support to them. And I'm so glad that that group has gone over there to further the work of the kingdom. I want to start with a little thought experiment this morning. Think back in your life. Is there one piece of advice that you've gotten that just kind of stands out as like something that was foundational in your development, something that really sticks with you and something that you try to use to this day? In the class I mentioned, my dad, who really, my dad, he passed away in 2013, and I miss him every day. But he really was a funny guy, and his advice, as I mentioned in class to me before I went off to college, was don't do anything dumb. And like I said, sometimes I lived up to that, and sometimes I didn't. But he was really just the kindest, gentlest man, but he just had a way with words and would give you advice on certain things that stuck with you. And another person in my life who I really truly view as one of the biggest influences in my life and a father figure is a preacher named David Sain. And he gave me a piece of advice that has stuck with me and has changed how I do my work. It has changed how I try to live my life. And it's one of those that I try to live up to and try to follow through on, but sometimes fall short, but it's one of those. And I'm going to give you that piece of advice. And advice is a biblical thing. If we look in Proverbs chapter 1, verse 5, right at the start of the Proverbs, a book full of advice, it says, let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. That's really what advice is, isn't it? It's kind of guidance. If someone would have given you the guidance to buy Apple stock in the 80s, and you took it, you'd be really happy you took that advice. But the advice from David Sain was, you can't deal with people how they should be. You have to deal with them how they are. And I don't even know what brought that advice on. I'm sure we were having a conversation, and I'm sure it was probably saying, oh, it shouldn't be like this. That person shouldn't do this. That, probably doing something like that. And he just stopped me right in my tracks. And he gave me that advice. It had to be at least 15 years ago. It's been a long time. And that nugget has stuck with me. And, he's also gave that same advice to my wife. And it's funny, we've been mad at times about something. And we'll go, David told us we can't deal with people how they should be. We have to deal with them how they are. I can't believe he told us that. I just want to be mad. And so that was a piece of advice. And, that might not be something that's pulled out word for word from the scriptures, but it's truly a scriptural piece of advice if we look at the Bible as a whole. And as in everything, our best example of this is Jesus. And so what I want to do this morning is take a look at a couple examples, three to be exact, examples where Jesus dealt with people how they were, met them where they were, instead of how they should be. And we'll take a look at a couple of those examples this morning, and then the lesson will be yours. I will say I got some advice from someone very dear to me about the sermon this morning, and that advice was, hey, people like short ones. So thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it. So as we go into our lesson this morning, the first example I want to look at comes from the 4th chapter of John chapter 4. And this could be a lengthy reading, but I'm just going to take a section of this story. So in John chapter 4, Jesus had learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was creating more disciples, and Jesus wasn't doing the baptizing, but his teaching was baptizing more people than John. And so they were, getting upset about this and kind of wanted to challenge him. So Jesus was at a well, and a woman from Samaria. And this is kind of where we're meeting people where they are and how they are instead of necessarily how they should be. If you've done any studies of the New Testament, you know that the Jewish people viewed the Samaritans as kind of a lower class than them, as someone that they didn't spend a lot of time with. And instead of viewing this woman that way, Jesus, once again, was our perfect example. So in verse 7, a woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria?" For Jews had no dealings with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob? He gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and livestock." Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I will not be thirsty or have to come here to draw water." Here's an example where, Jesus was giving her a lesson not about physical water, but about the water of life, and she wasn't getting it. And he could have gotten frustrated because her thought is, "Hey, I get this water. I don't have to come draw water out of this well anymore. I don't have to do any of this work." But Jesus said to her, "Go call your husband and come here." The woman answered him, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You are right in saying, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband. What you have said is true." So here we've got an example where Jesus is dealing with someone how they are and not how they should be. Should she have had 5 husbands? Well, of course not. Should she be living with someone currently who's not her husband? Of course not. And a lot of times, people would get away from people in those situations, wouldn't want to be associated, not only a Jew in this time associated with the Samaritan woman, but a woman whose history is so checkered, a person whose history. Jesus didn't view it that way. Jesus saw her as a soul. He saw her as someone that he knew he was going to die for. He saw her as someone that he loved. And that's our example that we could take from this one, is that Jesus saw people as individuals. He didn't see them how they should be, because he knew that no one truly lived a life as it should be. If everyone lived a life as they should, there would have been no need for his sacrifice, correct? There would have been no sin. There would have been no death brought into the world. But Jesus sets that example of viewing people as a soul, as a soul that's to be loved. Let's think in our walk, have we ever dealt with people who maybe don't have a very upstanding reputation, who maybe we don't want to be associated with because of either their financial situation, or maybe even the life that they've lived. That's not the example Jesus set for us. He set for us an example of dealing with people how they are and not how they should be. If everyone was already living with how they should be, there'd be no need for us to share the gospel with the lost. So this example of this woman at the well, of someone with an unsavory past, someone who maybe was viewed differently because of them being a Samaritan, because of the husbands they had, because of the current situation they were living in. A lot of times we, as people, might want to run away from those people, avoid those people, not be associated with them. But Jesus, our ultimate example, shows the kindness, shows the love to someone who truly needed that at the time. And as we read further in the story, she talks to Jesus some more. She goes and marvels to the people in the town about this man who told her everything she had done, and in turn brought more people to him. So, very interesting lesson to be learned from Jesus and how he dealt with the woman at the well. The next one I want to look at is in the 8th chapter of John. John chapter 8, starting in verse 1. So starting in verse 1, they went each to his house, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning, he came again to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery. And placing her in the midst, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. So what do you say?" This they said to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as he continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. But when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus stood up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go away, and from now on, sin no more." It's very easy to look at the sin of someone else and condemn them for it. It's very, excuse me, allergies. It's very easy to look at the actions of others and not hold ourselves to a similar standard. And this is an example of Jesus showing love. Was what the woman did right? Of course not. Of course it was not right. But Jesus, excuse me. But Jesus stood up to the people there in probably a difficult situation and set an example of what we are to do. That we are not, it's not our place to condemn sin. That's not our job. That's the role of the Father, who's going to do so perfectly. Our job is to show compassion, to show kindness, and to set an example of love. And that's exactly what Jesus did here. Thank you so much. That's exactly what Jesus did here. So while it might be human nature to look at things from a negative perspective, to look down on people for what they've done, and we are guilty of this, our job is not to judge in that way. Of course, we have to understand right from wrong, but our role is not to be an executioner of the will of God. It's to show love, it's to show compassion, and to set a positive example just the way Jesus did here. So one thing that people talk about when they talk about this story was the forgiveness and the love Jesus showed. But he really showed love there at the end, because what did he tell her? Go away and sin no more. He recognized that what she had done was sin. He recognized that it was not a good thing. But he set an example of love, and he set an example of teaching, and that's what we're to do as well with those people we come in contact with. The last example I want to look at this morning comes from the book of Luke. And this is a story that we all know from childhood. There's a song that goes with it about Zacchaeus being a wee little man, and he climbed up in a sycamore tree. And we won't read the entire story. But this is a story of a tax collector. And tax collectors at this time were viewed as vile, as terrible, because not only did they collect taxes for the Romans who were oppressive, but they oftentimes would, for lack of a better term, put their thumb on the scale and take a little bit extra for themselves, and they had the might of the government behind them to do so. And Zacchaeus was one of those tax collectors. They were not viewed in a positive light. And once again, that reputation, that unsavory nature of how they were viewed was something that a lot of people would run away from, would not want to be associated with. Jesus was not that person, was he? Jesus didn't run from Zacchaeus. He didn't get away from him. In fact, he said, I'm going to have dinner at your house tonight. And he showed compassion to him. He showed kindness to him. And it so touched Zacchaeus' heart that he knew that Jesus was the Son of God, and that he, in turn, repaid everything that he had taken, and then some. Zacchaeus learned a lesson. He learned, and his life was forever changed because of the compassion and kindness shown by Jesus. Now, had Jesus not, Zacchaeus was just up in a tree. Jesus could have walked by, could have not paid attention to him, could have just gone on with his day, and no one would have thought anything of it. But Jesus set an example for us, didn't he? He dealt with someone how they were and not how they should be. He met Zacchaeus where he was, taught him the truth in a loving, kind way, and forever changed his life. He didn't worry about how people viewed Zacchaeus. He didn't worry about how people viewed him. He was focused solely on what was the best thing for Zacchaeus at that time. And that's something we can all learn as we go into our daily dealings with people. As most of you probably know, I'm a therapist in a community mental health clinic. And I deal with people many times that are at their lowest. There's just sad situations. And it used to, it still does at times, I'll admit, but I used to really struggle with it. I used to kind of bring it home with me, and it would linger with me. And I, over the years, had to kind of learn that I had to leave that at work and have a separation of home. But it would be real easy for me when someone comes and they've been through a drug rehab several times and are still using. It'd be real easy for me to go, well, you're not getting it. I don't know what to do to help you, and write them off. And that happens sometimes in the mental health services. But that's not what I need to do, is it? I need to be a source of support for them. I need to be a kind voice. I need to be someone they can lean on when they're having a hard time. And sometimes it's really hard to do. But not only from a worldly work perspective of what I do is that important, from a perspective of being a Christian, it's important to show that kindness, to show that love, and to show that I care about someone. And Jesus is our example of that. Does that mean we accept sin as Christians? Of course not. Jesus didn't. Jesus told the woman caught in adultery, go and sin no more. He talked to the woman at the well about her sin. He talked to Zacchaeus about his sin. We have to do that. But at the same time, how do we do it? Do we do it from an air of not caring? Do we do it from a, well, you're going to do it anyways? No, Jesus shows us that one of the key aspects of how to deal with people how they are and not how they should be is doing so with love, doing so with kindness, doing so with a caring spirit. So as we go out and we come in contact with a lost and dying world, let's remember the example Jesus set for us with these stories, with these interactions with people who they were what they were. They weren't how they should be. And let's remember that there's times where we are not as we should be. We just are as we are. And, we want to treat people the way we want to be treated. If we are going through those struggles, we want someone to show us kindness, to show us love, to show us the right thing to do. Let's remember that as we deal with people. And if you right now are at a spot where you're not where you should be, you are where you are, there's no better time than now to come forward, confess your sin, and if you haven't been baptized and access the blood of Christ through baptism, be baptized and added to the church. And if you have been baptized, if you've started that walk but have gone off to the right or to the left, there's no better time than now to get on the straight and narrow, to have people who love you surround you, to offer prayers on your behalf, and to be a source of support, kindness, and love the way that Jesus was for the people in these stories and the way that he truly is for each and every one of us. If any has need, please come forward as we stand and